So, what if the real source of our biggest societal problems isn't what we think it is? What if it's not found in our parliaments or on Wall Street, but instead it starts inside the private homes of our most powerful leaders? Today, we're digging into a pretty radical theory that argues exactly that a crisis of leadership doesn't start in the boardroom, it actually starts in the living room. And this isn't just some metaphor, by the way. The theory we're unpacking here argues that a very specific, very private kind of failure is the direct cause of a massive public crisis. It's a fascinating idea, so let's get into it. All right, so where does it all begin? According to this line of thought, it all starts with what the source calls a crisis in partnership. We're talking about a fundamental breakdown happening within the marriages of the economic elite. So here's the pattern the speaker points out. You have what they call economic people, the titans of industry, the CEOs, and they tend to marry intellectuals. These are partners often chosen for their impressive degrees and pedigrees. Now, on paper, you'd think, wow, that's a power couple. But in reality, the argument is that these partnerships are consistently, and I mean consistently, failing. And here is the absolute core of that mismatch. The leader, the economic person, is out there navigating these immense societal pressures. What they desperately need is a true partner, right? A co-pilot. But instead, what they often get is someone chosen for more superficial reasons. A fancy degree, a certain look, who just isn't equipped for that role. They're not ready to be in the trenches with them. And this leads to a very specific feeling that the source calls kaguga bhata. It's this deep, almost suffocating frustration. Just imagine being a leader. You're facing an impossible problem that affects thousands of lives. You go home, hoping to talk it through with your partner, to find some support, and you get nothing. Just a blank wall. That feeling of being totally and utterly alone at the top, that's kaguga bhata. Okay, so this feeling, this frustration, it really brings us to the absolute heart of this whole theory, what it calls the unfulfilled role. The argument is that this entire crisis hinges on one specific person who is, essentially, failing to perform their true duty. And that key figure is the Samonim, which is a Korean term for the wife of a high-status man. Traditionally, it's a term of respect, but this philosophy just radically redefines her role. It argues she isn't just supposed to manage a household, her role is a public one, with a real duty to serve her husband's employees, the public, and even the nation itself. And this is where you see the huge gap between the ideals and the reality. The ideal role for the Samonim is to provide what's called nejo, or societal support. Leading social projects, being at the forefront of public welfare. But the observed reality, as the source argues it, is often a life completely disconnected from that duty, one that's more focused on luxury, shopping, and private affairs. So this theory proposes a really clear division of labor. The husband runs the business, the company, the corporation. But the Samonim's true domain, her real calling, is the social enterprise, the important work of public welfare and boosting the nation's well-being. They're meant to be two halves of a single, incredibly powerful leadership unit. So what happens when this crucial partnership fails? Well, that's where we get to the ripple effect. We're about to see how this private failure is argued to spiral out and become a major public and political crisis. The first domino to fall is public respect. It's pretty simple. When people see the Samonim enjoying all this immense privilege, the luxury cars, the designer clothes, but not doing anything for society, her status just evaporates. She goes from being this respected public figure to, well, just someone's wife. Now, this is where the speaker makes a pretty politically charged claim, and it's really important that we present it exactly as it is in the source material. He says, and I quote, "The opposition, the leftists, use this as nutrients to try and take control of society. When the people above do something wrong, they gain power." So to put that in neutral terms, the mechanism being proposed here is that this visible disconnect, this perceived selfishness of the elite, creates a lot of public resentment. And that resentment, he argues, becomes a powerful tool, a resource for political opponents to use, which in turn fuels social division and instability. So if that's the problem, what on earth is the solution? Well, the source doesn't just point out the issue, it proposes a new social calling, a massive movement designed to fix this breakdown starting from the very top. Okay, so the plan they lay out is basically a four-step path to leadership. First, the Solomanians and even their daughters have to step up into this new role of social parents. Then, they establish foundations to lead social welfare projects.
Third, these foundations create a way for the public to actually get involved and contribute. And finally, they launch one big, ambitious project to prove to everyone that this model actually works.
And what is that one big, high-impact project? Well, that brings us to our final section, the Suicide Zero Project. And this is a vision that starts with a very real national crisis, but has a truly global ambition.
The very first mission for these new social parents is to take on one of their nation's most urgent crises head-on. The project is called Suicide Zero, and its goal is every bit as ambitious as it sounds: to eliminate suicide.
But the vision doesn't stop there, not at all. The blueprint is to perfect this model in South Korea, and then use that success to launch a World Suicide Zero project, with its headquarters right there in Korea. The idea is for this one project to become a new global model for how we handle social welfare, led from the top down.
And how would all this get funded? Well, the argument is that corporations around the world are actually desperate to contribute to social causes, but they often don't know where their money will have a real impact. This movement, the theory goes, would create such a clear, effective, and trustworthy channel that global donations would just pour in.
And so we're left with the huge, central question of this whole philosophy. It's a fascinating and, you have to admit, a very provocative idea that the path to healing society's deepest wounds begins by redefining the duty of its most privileged people. Can it work? Is it a viable blueprint for real change? Or is it just a utopian fantasy? That's the thought I'll leave you with today.